Yesterday we talked about the low arch performance foot. Apparently it's turning into foot week. We're going to talk about the higher arch representations. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. I had a great IFAST University Q&A call yesterday. If you weren't there, you missed out. I would suggest that you try to join us next time. If you're not on IFAST University, please get signed up at ifastuniversity.com. Okay. Yesterday we talked about the low arch performance foot. Apparently it's turning into foot week. We're going to talk about the higher arch representations. And so, remember we have two positions of the foot where we're going to see this higher arch. So in our early propulsive foot, where the toes are in line with that first metatarsal. So this is the first contact with the first metatarsal medial heel. This is where we start to superimpose internal rotation on top of the external rotation field. So we have an externally rotated foot, but this is our first representation of IR. And so what we're going to see mostly in the hip, we're going to see a preservation of a straight leg raise. We're going to see access to early hip flexion, and we're going to see a partial availability of internal rotation up into the hip. And so when we look at the later representation, so this is where the heel is off the ground, we're moving back into ER, but now we've got extended toes under this circumstance. This is where we're going to see all those measures start to drop off. So we're going to lose straight leg raise, we're going to lose early hip flexion, and we're going to start to lose internal rotation. And so this is really important in regards to when we see this high arched foot, because we've got a couple representations, we've got to figure out where people are. So we're going to cut away to that video here in just a second. If you would like to ask me a question, go to askbillhartman at gmail.com, askbillhartman at gmail.com. If you'd like a 15-minute consultation, make sure you put 15-minute consultation in the subject line, and we'll arrange that at our mutual convenience. All right, we're going to cut away to the YouTube video where we talked about this high arch foot representation. We see some compensatory strategies and some strategies on how to deal with that. If you're interested in catching up on the videos, they're all up on YouTube, so go there. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And then I had a great mentorship call almost immediately after that, and that's where today's Q&A question is going to come from, because it was a really neat presentation, a little bit off the beaten path, and initially a little bit confusing as to what my mentee was really looking at, and then it becomes clear once you sort of put the pieces together. So we're going to use that, like I said, to drive to today's Q&A. So let me give you the scenario. The confusing presentation was that the client that he was working with had a limited straight leg raise, limited hip flexion, limited hip IR, but a really high arch in the foot, which again, that looks like a combination of a very late propulsive strategy in the pelvis and the hip, but an early propulsive foot. And so again, there's a little bit of confusion there, but if we break this down, there was one telling representation in the foot that sort of gives it away as to what's really going on. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about airplane wing physics, because if we can understand a little bit about an airplane wing, so bear with me here, if we understand a little bit about an airplane wing, we're going to understand a little bit more about an arch. So that the way that an airplane wing works is as the air passes over the airplane wing, it creates a low pressure above the wing and a high pressure below the wing, and that's what creates a lift. If we look at the arch of the foot, we're going to see a very similar representation here. So if I look at my early propulsive foot, I have an arch. And so what I actually have is I have a lot of concentric orientation underneath the foot in this early propulsive strategy. So this is a concentric yielding strategy on the bottom of the foot, which means that I have this eccentric strategy on top. So eccentric is high volume, low pressure. Underneath we have concentric orientation, which is low volume, high pressure. So this is literally just like an airplane wing. And so again, low pressure on top, high pressure on the bottom. And that's what's going to help me maintain that arch. As I move through the three rockers, so I have my early propulsive phase, which is my heel rocker, and then my ankle rocker. So to have a normal ankle rocker, what I have to be able to do is I have to be able to flip-flop the pressures. So I have to be able to create the eccentric orientation on the bottom, so the low pressure strategy here, and the high pressure on top. And so if I can't create the transition in pressures, I can't translate the ankle over the foot. And so it looks like I might be stuck here. Now, let's go back to our initial representation here. We have somebody that is way forward. We have posterior lower compression in the pelvis. We have posterior lower compression in the thorax, and we have a foot that looks like a high pressure foot underneath. Well, what we have to understand is that as we go through ankle rocker and we pick up this heel, so as I move into late propulsion, I'm moving back towards where I'm going to translate the tibia posteriorly again, and I'm going to create that, what you'll look in the literature will say the windlass effect, where the heel comes up. I'm recapturing concentric orientation underneath, so I'm creating that high pressure strategy underneath the foot. And under normal circumstances, I would have toe extension. But if I take this foot and I jam the heel down, you can see that I have this massive amount of concentric orientation here. If the heel is down and I keep the tibia over the foot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a reversal of the effect on the concentric orientation on the bottom of the foot. So here we actually get to use dead guy anatomy for a second, which is kind of fun. So the dead guys, they pulled on the muscles from this end, and they go, oh, I got toe flexors. So what I end up with is a foot that looks like that. So we have a high arch in a foot, we have a low pressure strategy on top of the foot, and then we have toes that are flexed at the end. And so what that tells us is we had a foot that was trying to pick up the heel into a late propulsive strategy, but I couldn't get the heel up because of the center of gravity being too far back, and so I just curled my toes under. So we actually do have a foot that matches the propulsive strategy above. So what we're going to see, we'll see this on a lot of folks that are really driven by compressive strategies and really, really strong concentric orientation. So again, we can pick on powerlifters a lot because that they drive a tremendous amount of these compressive strategies to lift very, very heavy weights. So you'll see like the toed out kind of a position. You'll see the powerlifter with a lot of compressive strategy and very, very high arches, almost to the point where they can't even get their big toes down to the ground, but they're gripping the floor with the end of their toes. So the simple strategy is to say, okay, well, let's just move you back towards this normal middle propulsion, which would be great and all fine and wonderful if it's doable. So it's very, very difficult to do this because of the amount of concentric orientation that you have all the way up the chain, so to speak. So the solution here then is to take them all the way back to early propulsion, because then we don't have to force them out of this concentric orientation right away. So this is going to be situations where we might start with an anti-gravity situation. So we put them on their back, we put them in hook line, and we can drop that foot down into that early propulsive strategy without a lot of gravity on it, and that might be a solution for us if we have enough hip flexion available to us. If we don't, then we drop them further towards the traditional 0 degrees of hip extension. We keep them in a slightly early propulsive strategy, foot on the wall, but hip closer to extension, as represented here. And that might be the way that we start them. If we can move them into the gym, then this is going to be where we do all of our heels elevated activities. So the heels elevated is going to move us back towards a fairly early propulsive strategy. We're going to get that posterior expansion that we're looking for, and then we can slowly start to move them back forward through a normal middle propulsive strategy. So what we'll do is we'll do like maybe heels elevated toe touch, heels elevated squat might follow that. And then maybe we can move into split stance orientation as we start to capture more and more hip flexion. So that might be a front foot heel elevated split squat, and then moving them towards a normal front foot elevated split squat. And eventually a shallow stance split squat that allows a lot of tibial translation over the foot. So we're re-educating this middle propulsive strategy where we can go from the high pressure arch to the low pressure arch back to the high pressure arch. In a worst case scenario, where we have a lot of anterior posterior compressive strategies, what we may need to do is do some of these things in isolation. So we got a little video here that should be playing if my technology is effective, where you can actually see them pulling the tibia forward. So they're learning how to translate the tibia using the anterior compartment, moving from eccentric orientation to concentric orientation to go from the high pressure arch to low pressure arch. And so again, you can use this. This is also a great way to recapture your internal rotations all the way up the chain. A little hint for you there. So I hope this is useful for you. Again, it's just a little bit of pressure related relationships through the foot. This is also going to help you sort of diagnose what kind of an orthotic you might need, what kind of a shoe you might need. That's a different story for a different day.